Mike is a logical software engineer, while Lena is an emotional designer. They've been best friends since college, started a company together, and built a dating app that's now attracting major investment. But on a Monday morning, a seemingly minor argument over the color of a button led to them not even speaking to each other. No one could have predicted that something so trivial could put both their friendship and the future of the company at risk. The next morning, the Pulse office was unusually quiet. Lena arrived early, opened her laptop like every other day, but avoided looking toward the desk across from hers, where Mike usually sat. That day, he came in late. When he walked in, he said nothing except a brief nod to the team, then put on his headphones and buried himself in his screen, as if coding were the only way to escape reality. The next meeting only made the atmosphere heavier. The whole team was counting on the new interface design, the one that would be presented to investors the following week. But when the prototype appeared on the screen, the tension from the day before reignited. We're sacrificing the consistency of the entire system just to appeal to users' emotions for one fleeting moment? Mike asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Lena didn't hesitate. It's not about appealing to them, it's about reaching them. This is a dating app, not accounting software. It needs to make people feel chosen, connected, not just navigate efficiently. And what about performance? Efficiency? Let's not forget we have millions of data points showing users click faster when the button is at the bottom. Mike shot back, his voice now noticeably louder. And we also have thousands of users who leave after the first try because they don't feel anything, Lena said slowly, but clearly. Silence. Everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath. The issue was no longer about the button, or even user experience. Their conflict now stood for something bigger, a clash of two worldviews. Performance versus emotion, logic versus instinct, engineering versus art. They used to admire each other for those differences. Now, those very differences had become a wall between them. When the meeting ended, Lena packed up early and left. Mike stayed, eyes on the screen but unable to write a single line of code. He felt exhausted, not from the work, but from the sense that he was losing something more important, a friend, an ally. That night, neither of them slept well. Lena curled up under her blanket, replaying memories of the early days when the two of them would sit in a tiny cafe, debating passionately but always ending in laughter. Mike scrolled through old photos on his phone, one of the team's first launch day, him and Lena grinning like nothing in the world could go wrong. How did it get to this point? Was it really worth it for a button, or rather, a point of view to threaten a friendship that once felt unbreakable? That question led them both, the next morning, to the same decision. To turn to the one person who might help them see things clearly again, Mr. Miller, the founder of Pulse, and the man who had entrusted them with the company in the first place. Mike and Lena first met nearly 10 years ago at a UX design seminar at Stanford University. At the time, Mike was a computer science student brilliant with algorithms but awkward in conversation. Lena, studying communication design, was outgoing, full of creativity and inspiration. They couldn't have been more different, and maybe that's exactly why they made such an unexpectedly perfect pair. After graduation, they moved to Austin to start a company together. Their startup, Pulse, a dating app that uses AI to connect people based on emotional cues, quickly drew attention. Lena took charge of visuals, UI, and user experience, while Mike built the data systems and algorithms behind it. Their contrasting personalities created balance. Mike kept Lena grounded, and Lena helped Mike lift his head and see the people behind the code. In those early years, they worked tirelessly, sleepless nights fixing bugs, nerve-wracking investor pitches, shared meals at the office. Their friendship weathered every challenge. They weren't just co-founders, they trusted each other like family. But the more success they found, the heavier the pressure became. Pulse had recently closed a $5 million series of funding round. With the new budget, the team was racing to launch a major update, a new interface that could define the app's future. And then, Monday morning happened. Mike suggested moving the Connect button to the bottom of the screen to align with standard navigation logic. Lena insisted on keeping it in the center because users will feel more agency and emotional impact with that choice. At first, it was just a light debate. But it escalated quickly. Mike accused Lena of chasing feelings without understanding the system. Lena snapped back that Mike treated users like robots. Harsh words. Cold stares. It was no longer about UX, it was a clash of egos between two people who once worked in perfect sync. After the meeting, Mike didn't say a word, just sent a curt email. Lena walked out without looking back. The rest of the team could feel the tension hang in the air like a storm cloud. Two close friends, once inseparable through every obstacle, now stood on opposite sides of a battle line, all over a tiny button on a screen. But the real issue wasn't the button. The real issue was this. When you let differences overshadow friendship, what's left? The next morning, Mike sent Lena a message. No long explanations, no anger, just a simple line. I think we should talk to Mr. Miller. Less than a minute later, Lena replied. Agreed. 3 p.m. today? Sometimes, even when wounds haven't fully healed, reason still points us to what's right. They both knew, if this conflict dragged on any longer, it wouldn't just damage their friendship, it could harm Pulse, the passion project they had poured their hearts into. Mr. Miller, the founder of Pulse, had stepped back into an advisory role after handing the reins over to Mike and Lena. Still, to everyone in the company, he remained a living landmark, a man who had weathered bitter failures before finally tasting success. His small office was tucked away on the top floor, where natural light poured in from every direction, giving it a calm, almost sacred contrast to the hectic buzz below. Lena arrived first. Mike followed a few minutes later. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, silent, eyes averted. Mr. Miller smiled gently, poured tea for all three, and settled into the armchair across from them. He didn't ask why they were there, he'd already heard whispers from the engineering team. But instead of diving into the issue, he began with what seemed like an unrelated story. When I was younger, he said slowly, my co-founder at my first company, a hardware engineer, almost punched me over the color of our product logo. He paused, took a sip of tea, then continued. He said red meant strength. I wanted blue for trust. We argued for a week. Then one day, mid-argument in an elevator, a customer walked in, glanced at the logo, and asked, "What does this thing actually do?" We both froze. Because we'd forgotten the most important question: what does the user really need? Mike and Lena glanced at each other for the first time in days. Mr. Miller went on. The question isn't who's right. The question is, are you willing to take a step back together to see the bigger picture? Pulse wasn't built on algorithms or design alone. It was built on trust and the synergy of two very different minds working as one. Don't let a button or an ego erase that. Silence filled the room. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. Lena spoke first. I think we need to review the entire user journey, not just the button's position. Mike nodded. And maybe we A/B tested instead of forcing a decision. A quiet smile appeared on Mr. Miller's face. Not because he had proven a point, but because he knew. They were ready to listen to each other again. The meeting with Mr. Miller ended without the final decision Mike and Lena had hoped for. There was no definitive answer, no winner or loser. But as they stepped out of that sunlit top-floor office, both felt that something had shifted, not the problem itself, but the way they saw it. That afternoon, they returned to the office and sat down together, for the first time in days, not to argue, but to think side by side. They laid the design drafts across the table, pulled up past user data, and began discussing things in an entirely different tone. Lena shared emotional insights and feedback from user interviews she'd conducted during testing. Mike brought up user behavior stats and how different choices would affect future scalability. Instead of clinging to their individual views, they began asking each other new kinds of questions. What if we look at this from a new user's perspective? Is there a way to keep the emotional impact without sacrificing performance? Are we choosing what's easiest for us, but harder for the user? In the end, it wasn't logic or emotion that won, it was empathy. Through listening and mutual respect, they arrived at a compromise, a dynamic interface where the connect button would shift position based on user behavior in different test versions. It honored the personalized experience Lena advocated for, while preserving the performance efficiency Mike prioritized. They agreed to run A/B testing with a smaller user group before making any system-wide changes. When the design and engineering teams saw their co-founders working side by side again, the energy in the office came back to life. Meetings were filled with laughter once more, code began flowing again, and the new design started shaping not just a more polished product, but a more mature one, inside and out. But more importantly, Mike and Lena walked away with a lesson no university or textbook could teach. Many conflicts don't need to be won, they need to be understood. The other person isn't always wrong, they may just be looking from a different angle. They stopped seeing each other as the logic-driven engineer and the emotional designer, and began seeing each other for what they truly were, two essential parts of something greater, a union of mind and heart. And just as Mr. Miller once said, "In a world full of noise and ego, sometimes the real progress comes not from pushing forward, but from stepping back, so we can truly see each other again." 2 weeks after their meeting with Mr. Miller, Pulse launched its beta version with the redesigned interface. The A/B testing results exceeded expectations. Users who experienced the behavior-driven navigation spent 23% more time engaging with the app. The 7-day retention rate saw a significant jump, and perhaps most tellingly, the number of positive comments about the emotional experience of the app doubled. The whole office celebrated. But what truly lifted everyone's spirits wasn't just the numbers, it was the return of the strange duo, Mike and Lena. The tension was gone, replaced by lively debates, light teasing, and late work sessions that ended with a familiar, "Wanna grab food?" One afternoon, as the team gathered to reflect on the journey behind the update, Lena stood up and said something no one expected. "There was a moment I honestly thought a single button would ruin everything. But the truth is, our differences in perspective are what made this product better." Mike laughed and added, "And I realized I might have been right about the data, but wrong about the people. Luckily, I didn't have to learn that lesson alone." The room burst into laughter. But behind that laughter was something deeper, growth. Not just in how they built their product, but in how they chose to protect their friendship, in a world where ego so often drowns out empathy. The story of Mike and Lena isn't just a startup tale. It's a mirror for anyone navigating adulthood from 25 to 45 and beyond. Whether at work, within family, or among friends, most arguments don't start over something huge. They often begin with something small, inflated by pride, misunderstanding, or the fear of not being heard. And sometimes, all it takes is a pause. A moment to stop seeing the other person as an opponent in a disagreement and instead, to remember the shared history, the laughter, the long nights, the hard-won trust. In that pause, the story changes. Mike and Lena are still different. They will keep disagreeing, probably often. But the next time it happens, they'll remember. Friendship doesn't require sameness. It requires the patience to understand, and the courage to keep walking together. In a high-pressure tech world where every decision feels urgent, perhaps the most valuable lesson they learned wasn't how to optimize UI, but how to hold on to a friendship. Just like holding on to the soul of the very company they built. And what about you? Are you arguing over a button? Or forgetting someone who once meant the world to you?